It's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream. Change has come to America.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
Really have a meltdown of extreme proportion here, a sort of slow motion constitutional crisis. And people who believe that obstruction of justice is just some technical thing, and that until we get evidence of direct collusion with Russia, and I think that might be coming, people who think that it's a minor matter have really lost sight of the rule of law. The federal law in this area talks about endeavors to impede the due administration of law, either by a federal agency or by a congressional committee. The running back and forth by Devin Nunes is also part of the obstruction scheme. He, too, could be prosecuted, but for the speech and debate clause. What we have here is a White House that is orchestrating a massive cover-up, more serious than that of Richard Nixon, and covering something that goes to the national security of the United States, an attack by a hostile foreign power on our democracy, on our power grid, and the administration is doing nothing about it.
Oh my God, this man is so dangerous. I can't even explain to you. And you know, it all ties together in a nice little package when you understand that this president was selected for us and was marketed to us by a defense contractor of a foreign government. Not a hostile foreign government. They were based in London. They were a UK-based defense contractor. And that is who marketed Donald Trump to us. They worked with the Brexit campaign as well. And they were going back and forth and back and forth to Russia. Something so evil and unholy has happened here in these United States. And you have a president who, I mean, that's Lawrence Tribe. Do you know who Lawrence Tribe is? Lawrence Tribe is probably one of the top 5 constitutional law professors in this country. People literally sign up to take Lawrence Tribe's constitutional law classes at Harvard years in advance so that they can learn at the knee of Lawrence Tribe. Lawrence Tribe and John Dean, who lived through, I mean, the only Nixon I want to hear about anymore is Cynthia Nixon. Yay! She's running for governor in New York. Cynthia Nixon. Isn't that amazing? Read them the Miranda rights. Go ahead, Cynthia. Do it. Wasn't her baby named Brady? Brady. Bring your own Brady bill. Protect the children. Her Brady bill means something. Here's John Dean. Here's John Dean commenting.
Are you surprised President Trump has now started going after Mueller by name?
I am not. What I think we're witnessing is a very public obstruction of justice.
Oh, my God.
He, as I see it, has already exceeded everything that Nixon did. He's really much more intimately involved than Nixon ever was in the cover-up. Nixon, in the first 8 months of Watergate, just learns a little bit now and then from his chief of staff, Bob Haldeman. He's not really in it. It's later when things get hotter that he gets hands-on. But Trump, from the very beginning, he's involved in this. And so I see a very different profile, and the big difference being Nixon was behind closed doors, so everyone was surprised when there were recordings of it. Trump is just right out front on it, and he's doing it very publicly.
That's a pretty stunning statement. That I just want to have you repeat that. You're saying, in your opinion, Donald Trump has gone farther than Richard Nixon did to obstruct justice?
That's exactly what I'm saying. I think Trump is Nixon on steroids and stilts.
Oh, Jesus.
Carl, I've got to get you. And do you agree with that?
I think there is no question that he has presided over a cover-up from day one. The question is, what is the criminality of the cover-up that he is presiding over? And that's why we have a special prosecutor. But there is no question whatsoever that he has sought at every turn. Look at the lies that he has told from the beginning. He has rarely been truthful about any matter involved in the whole Russia investigation. Trey Gowdy has got it exactly right. Mr. President, if you are innocent, including of collusion, why are you acting the way you have been acting?
Like guilty.
And so his only recourse, and what we are seeing now, is to go to his base and get them exercise that this is a witch hunt, which it is not. This is a legitimate investigation. And really, if there were a witch hunt going on, there are plenty of provisions that after this investigation is over, if it is allowed to run its course.
Oh, I don't know what happened there. All right, so so far, what do you have? You've got one of the smartest, most sought-after constitutional attorneys and scholars, Lawrence Tribe, saying that the president is involved in a cover-up. You've got a White House counsel, former White House counsel to one Richard Nixon, a guy who literally went to jail because he would not lie for Richard Nixon and exposed the corruption that was the Nixon White House. And again, the only Nixon I want to hear about is Cynthia Nixon. And then you've got the reporter Carl Bernstein, who covered Watergate and the Nixon administration. And again, the only Nixon I want to hear about is Cynthia Nixon, running for governor of New York City. Everybody. And now we'll have Phil Mudd from a guy who has served in the CIA, a guy who has then served in the FBI. And he's describing what the president is doing here.
They tried to frame.
Oh, no, sorry.
Incoming...
Oh, sorry. This is, no, that's Chris. 2020. One moment, please. 16, right? No, because it's, oh, I see. They're going to play the clip. All right. So who is Joe DiGenova? I guess I have to say that before I play the clip, because Joe DiGenova is at the front of this clip, and Phil Mudd will comment on Joe DiGenova after he hears this clip. Now, Joe DiGenova has the kinds of beliefs and ideas that you usually see expressed, let's say on a cardboard sign at the exit ramp of I-95 or at a bus stop by a guy who's yelling at the passing cars while wearing 3 coats. Does that explain? Okay, Joe DiGenova, I think for 4 miserable years of his life, he was a U.S. attorney way back in the 80s, and him and his wife have become political, white-collar corruption defenders for all these many years, except when it comes to the Clintons. The Clintons, they had to be prosecuted. The Clintons had to be put in jail. The Clintons were dirty. They hate them. They literally despise them, and yet they've defended a whole host of white-collar criminals. Okay, and they go on the TV, and they were early pundits in the 90s, particularly on the O.J. Simpson trial, then later in the Clinton impeachment era, and they have made it rain for their law firm by doing this kind of punditry. So they're Fox News analysts now, and Donald Trump is hiring everybody from Fox News, beginning with Katie McFarland, who's already come and gone, and, what's her name, Newhart at the State Department. She's a Fox News hostess. I mean, you see he's going, John Bolton is a Fox News commentator. John Bolton was also involved with Cambridge Analytica. In fact, the John Bolton PAC was a vessel through which money flowed to Cambridge Analytica when John Bolton thought he could run for office. I mean, this is so deeply embedded in the Fox News culture. But anyway, Joe DiGenova was on Fox News saying that, and yesterday the president was tweeting that it was fake news that he was going to replace his legal team. He's very happy with them, and it's all fake news, and he's not hiring any other attorneys. And then, bam, he goes out and hires Joe DiGenova of Fox News fame. Why? Because he's been auditioning Joe DiGenova on the Fox News, and Joe DiGenova has created a massive conspiracy theory that is out to get Donald Trump. And it goes something like this. Our intelligence community is bogus. Our law enforcement community, they all need to be frog marched out. They're all part of a deep state. And the deep state has targeted Donald Trump since the beginning. Not because he's done, he's broken the law, not because he might have money laundered, not because he had mob connections, not because he was a racist, where he said the Central Park Five should die, or a birther, or where he said that, black people couldn't, be dealers on his floor in the casino when the mob came in to gamble because the mob didn't like the black dealers. And so they had to leave not because of any of Donald Trump's behavior, or law breaking, or lawlessness, or his involvement with Cambridge Analytica, which was a Mercer billionaire funded thing, or all the lies. No. It's because we are a fundamentally third world banana republic with a law enforcement community and an intelligence community that is, fourth rate, and they are conspiring to get Donald Trump. That's who Joe DeGenova is. And Donald Trump just hired him. Yeah. Now, I doubt Joe DeGenova, his lunatic act on Fox is not going to play in court. So I don't think that he will represent Donald Trump in court, because in court, if you're stealing your lines from an old episode of, The Untouchables or Perry Mason, the court isn't going to sit still for this. But he needs a deep state crazy on his legal team to rile up the base and get them to harass the Republican members of Congress, who will ultimately decide if we remain stuck with this lawbreaker, Donald Trump. Also, I don't think Joe DeGenova could make it into the court because I don't think he could get through the metal detectors wearing that tinfoil hat. But here he is.
They tried to frame an incoming president with a false Russian conspiracy that never existed, and they knew it, and they plotted to ruin him as a candidate and then destroy him as a president.
Phil Mudd, he's also lashed out at the FBI. He's lashed out at the DOJ. He's talked about this conspiracy, and this is now the man that Donald Trump has brought on who can go out there and be a fighter for him. What's the impact there?
There's no impact on the investigation. Look, the investigators are going to do what they want. I see two aspects to the hiring of DeGenova. The first you talked about, I don't think he's about the investigation. He's about the face of the investigation. A lot of people in this country, I talk to them all the time, I get emails from them, believe in these deep state conspiracies. They think there's some sort of conspiracy in the government to take out the president. This guy's going to be on TV talking about this all the time. The other thing is, I think this is more about what happens after the investigation. If you get further indictments, for example, of people in the Oval Office, this guy is going to be on 2 minutes later saying, I told you there is a conspiracy against the White House. I see it now, and now we've got to take action to stop the conspiracy. He's about TV, and he's about the after action.
Exactly. This is about discrediting Robert Mueller. This is about discrediting the whole investigation. Trump is sending up these trial balloons that, to figure out what would happen if he fired Mueller. And all the congressional Republicans do is ooh and ah at all the pretty balloons. Mitch McConnell has said absolutely nothing. He will do absolutely nothing to introduce legislation to protect Robert Mueller's investigation. He has done nothing to stop Donald Trump. And Mitch McConnell is a guy who stopped a Supreme Court justice from being named to the bench for over a year, left that seat open so that the next Republican president, which Mitch McConnell knew was going to happen, because here's another thing. This is going to send a shiver up your spine. You know how we've been trying to figure out why the Republicans are doing nothing about this Russia investigation? Why Devin Nunes and the House and Mitch McConnell is so quiet, and why they just don't stop him? Why Paul Ryan won't say anything except Mueller ought to be allowed to do his job, but they won't introduce, as leaders of the Senate and the House, they won't introduce a piece of legislation that we desperately need that would keep Mueller working no matter what, that we would take away from the president the ability to fire Robert Mueller. I was reading through all these Cambridge Analytica reports. Most of them started over at the London Observer, the Observer of London. The New York Times did a report, in the past few days, and then interviews subsequently took place on ITV in London, which is a sister of NBC in the United States. NBC had done reporting about this. You had the Guardian doing a full report, right? And as you read through all of these newspaper reports, some of them 7, pages, 9 pages, and as you read through these articles, one after the other, some, everybody's breaking it up into you take this area, you take this area. So the areas that they are looking into Cambridge Analytica for is, number one, this app that took all your information without your permission, okay? Number two, selling it and violating the Facebook platform's privacy agreements and their agreements with these people who they invited these app developers onto Facebook, and they were telling them, oh, you want to be on Facebook, and put your app on Facebook because what we can offer you is all these people. You were the product that Facebook was selling. And these app developers, even your games like Candy Crush, or retailers that say sign in with Facebook. What we're now finding out is that when you sign in with Facebook, it's not that they're just getting your information, which you're sort of aware of, because some people get a message that says you're aware by logging in this way, you are giving permission to give your email address or to give your age or to give your all your Facebook stuff, and some people don't read it and they just click anyway. But that's one thing. What you don't know is they're doing it to all your friends who haven't given permission to this vendor, whoever it might be, this app developer, this Candy Crush game, this Farmville game, or to a retailer. So there's that. Then there's another angle that reporters are taking about the foreign actors who were involved in this app and Cambridge Analytica, and how they got hold of all your information. Foreign actors, how a foreign defense contractor, suddenly waded into American politics, which ought to be illegal. I believe it is, and they were warned. And then another aspect of this investigation is, how do you get your data back? And the final part of this investigation that's being done by investigative journalists is twofold. How do you get your data back, number one? And number two, how many other campaigns was Cambridge Analytica involved in? Well, it turns out 44 American Republicans used Cambridge Analytica's crazy way to sell them to you. 44. And maybe this is why, because we've been trying to figure out for the longest time, why does Congress just sit there and refuse to do what they swore to do when they all took the oath of office, and that was to protect and defend the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and to perform oversight on the executive branch? Why are they shirking their duty? And it seems to me that as this story develops, and the reporters go to it, because you can see that they've all the investigative journalists are looking at different angles about what happened here with this data company, and what happened here with Facebook, and what happens here with defense contractors and foreigners, and all of these things that went into selling a completely empty vessel, a demagogue, a fan of Vladimir Putin's at the least, at the most somebody blackmailable by Vladimir Putin, to you as being the person who can alone fix it for you, whatever your issue was. 44 other Republicans are also tainted by this kind of marketing, by signing up with Cambridge Analytica. Turns out Ted Cruz had given, prior to Donald Trump, and it seems like perhaps in tandem with Donald Trump, with Cambridge Analytica. Cruz spent $750,000 at Cambridge, and yet they're out pitching Donald Trump and Corey Lewandowski almost 2 years before you knew that Donald Trump was going to run for president. This is a crazy, crazy off-the-hook story, but it could explain why the Republicans don't want to investigate this. It could explain why they're so terrified to hold Donald Trump accountable or to let Mueller finish his job. It could explain why the House Intelligence Committee put out this bogus one-page report that they say is based on 150 pages that we've never seen. that we've never seen, saying there was no, we didn't observe any collusion. And then the Democrats released their report. And by the way, nobody, hardly anybody in the press covers the Democratic minority's report. But I have it right here. And one of the people in this list that they made of witnesses that they were not allowed to examine or want to examine further is Trump campaign digital operation. Here is what the minority, which would be Schiff and Swalwell and all the Democrats on the Intelligence Committee in the House wrote. They wrote, the committee ought to, meaning they haven't. The committee ought to interview all relevant persons involved or associated with the Trump campaign's digital operation to determine whether the campaign coordinated in any way with Russia in its digital program. The committee will not be able to fully evaluate the campaign's digital operation without speaking to a broader cross-section of individuals who can provide greater insight into the digital operation's day-to-day activities or its relationship with Cambridge Analytica. The committee also must interview individuals from other companies who conducted technology-related work on behalf of the Trump campaign or on behalf of other entities being funded through independent expenditures. That's PACs, political action committees, and private companies and billionaires like the Mercers, right? To gain a full picture of whether there was any coordination between Russia's extensive social media efforts on Trump's behalf and the campaign itself. Goes on for another few paragraphs to talk about Cambridge Analytica and the various people they would like to speak to, including Rebecca Mercer, including Teresa Hong, who was the digital content director for the Trump campaign, including people at Cambridge Analytica, including specific people that were the chief data officer there, a guy named Alex Taylor and Julian Wheatland, and the chairman of Cambridge's parent company, which would be Alexander Nix. They have never been able to talk to these people. And you know what's fascinating about this little whistleblower, who is really one of the smartest dudes you will come across, Chris Riley? He keeps insisting that they were going back and forth between London and Russia, and creating pitch decks of how Americans could be exploited for the benefit of Vladimir Putin. It's shocking. It's just shocking. But this is what he said.
I think what's really important for people to understand is that this company misappropriated data of upwards of 50 million people from Facebook. They misused that data. That data was processed by psychologists who were going back and forth between London and Russia, who are also working on projects in Russia for Russians, that this company was using this data. Meanwhile, as it was talking to the second largest oil company of Russia, sending work that I was doing to the CEO of Lukoil, which has known links with the Russian FSB, which is their state security services. I think we need to step back for a second and depoliticize this, because this is about the safety of Americans and the integrity of the American democratic process. If this data was misappropriated and mishandled by this company, and I think that they need to be investigated for that.
Yeah.
Wow. So that was yesterday. There's more. He was on CNN last night, Chris Wiley was, and they were asking, Don Lemon was asking him deeper questions about Lukoil and Russians and back and forth. And he actually described the pitch deck, which if you're in business and you've ever done a PowerPoint presentation, or you've ever had a pitch meeting with somebody to sell your book or a movie idea or a product that and you want to show the potential client who you can reach and how you would do it. It's a pitch deck, right? And it's just a bunch of slides that show. He said the pitch deck that was shown to the Russians was his pitch deck, and it was all about psychological modeling of voters to persuade them to vote a certain way. And Lukoil had then turned around and told the public, or people that were investigating in London, the parliament and stuff, oh no, we were trying to get them to use, our discount card at Turkish gas stations. And this made Christopher Wiley crazy last night. I mean, he got very animated when that was presented to him.
And I want to ask you about Professor Kogan, the Cambridge University researcher who created the personality test app that harvested this data for Cambridge Analytica in Russian American. Do you think any of the information he collected went back to Russia, Christopher?
Well, what I do know is that Professor Kogan, who managed this data harvesting scheme of 50 million Americans, was going back and forth between London and Russia, working at St. Petersburg University on Russian-funded programs to look at psychological profiling, and indeed talking about the value of social data in political targeting. Meanwhile, as we're talking to Lukoil about the same program, to me, my concern is that Cambridge Analytica, whether I'm not saying that it did it intentionally, but I am concerned that we made Russia aware of the programs that we were working on, and that might have sparked an idea that eventually led to some of the disinformation programs that we've seen and the interference that we've seen from Russia in American elections. So for me, I'm concerned about that. And if I played some kind of role in that, I feel like it is my duty to tell people about it, which is why I'm talking to you.
So listen, there's also this reported pitch that Cambridge Analytica made to Lukoil. You mentioned Lukoil, which is a Russian oil producer. It was back in 2014. How the presentation had little to do with oil consumers, but had everything to do with election disruption techniques. That's according to documents you provided to the Observer newspaper. Yeah. Why would an oil company need to be briefed on that?
Don't know. Ask Cambridge Analytica. Ask Lukoil. I don't know. I was just told that I needed to give a briefing on, the Ripon project. That's the data harvesting project and the algorithms that we were doing. I know that Alexander Nix, in an email, he said that he sent my white paper on the program that we were doing, harvesting, data of 50 million plus Americans, sent it to the CEO of Lukoil. I don't know if you've seen the pitch that Alexander put together for Lukoil, but it has nothing to do with oil. It has nothing to do with consumers, and it has everything to do with rumor campaigns, attitudinal inoculation, sowing distrust in civic institutions in Nigeria, for example. For me, I just find it. I don't understand why it is that Alexander Nix and Cambridge Analytica would want to pitch disinformation and rumor campaigns to Lukoil, as it's then also telling Lukoil, by the way, we have all these massive data assets at our disposal for an oil company in Russia. It doesn't make sense.
Lukoil says, Christopher, that they never hired Cambridge Analytica, but don't deny receiving a presentation about the data firm's capabilities. They say it was to promote their gas stations in Turkey. Do you think that's true?
Well, if that's true, why did he create a pitch deck that was about setting up disinformation and rumor campaigns? I mean, why is it that he sent my white paper on the data harvesting capabilities of the company and what we were doing in America, if it was to do with Turkey? I don't why? How does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm. That is crazy. I mean, now Turkey makes me think of Michael Flynn, and Michael Flynn was working with Turkey, and this is a guy who pled guilty to lying to the FBI. There is some connection. It's not clear to me yet exactly what it is, but Lukoil and Turkey and Cambridge and Flynn and Manafort and Ukrainian hookers, which is what Alexander Nix was pitching to a guy who was posing as a Sri Lankan Politico who was interested in Cambridge Analytica's ability to select leaders. But the Sri Lankan was really a reporter for Channel 4 in London. And Alexander Nix was caught on tape, and the audio is super bad, and I'm sure you've seen it on TV. I mean, I could play it, but it's so hard to understand. Basically, what he's saying is we can use Ukrainian sex workers, and we can send them to your opponent's house, and we can film them, doing what they do with these Ukrainian hookers and use it as compromat in Sri Lanka. He also suggested that You go to your opponent in Sri Lanka and you make them an offer they can't refuse. You offer them a ton of money. You pose as a student or you pose as a wealthy landowner. And you say that you're very interested in the future of Sri Lanka. And so you're willing to give under the table, you know, $1 million or whatever. And you film the exchange and you then blackmail your opponent. Basically, what I'm saying here is Cambridge Analytica is a very fancy name for Steve Bannon and Robert and Rebecca Mercer's dirty tricks and theft operation. They should have just named themselves the New Plumbers, although it sounds like you know, a 60s band, you know, but they really should, because Donald Trump did not just happen. Donald Trump was created, Donald Trump was crafted, and Donald Trump was sold to very frightened Americans, to people who were psychographically profiled as being terrified little individuals who did not understand the world around them and its changing nature. But Donald Trump could come, and by the way, we know this because Chris Wiley said last night something that made me crazy, okay? That they, and you know, this is funny because Joe DeGeneva doesn't know a whole lot of words either for all his legal career, you know, that they're pitching that there is a deep state, and the deep state is framing Donald Trump. It's framing Donald Trump, right? This is what Joe DeGeneva is saying. Well, check this out. This is Chris Wiley, who left Cambridge in 2015, along with a dozen other people working for Cambridge because they thought what they were doing was dirty and probably illegal.
So we were testing all kinds of messages and all kinds of imagery that included, you know, images of walls, people scaling walls. You know, we tested Drain the Swamp. You know, testing ideas of the deep state and the, you know, the NSA watching you, and, you know, the government is you know, conspiring against you. And a lot of these narratives, which at the time would have seemed, you know, crazy for a mainstream candidate to you know, run on. Those were the things that we were finding, that there were pockets of Americans who this really appealed to, and Steve Bannon knew that because we were doing the research on it. And I was surprised when I saw, you know, the Trump campaign, and it, you know, started, you know, talking about, you know, building walls or draining the swamp, and I'm remembering in my head, wait, we tested this. So, you know, you would have to ask the company, you know, and Steve Bannon where they got these narratives. But I know that we were testing these narratives, you know, well before Trump had even announced.
Oh my God. Well before Trump even announced. And here's why he decided to leave Cambridge Analytica. He said that they were doing things that he believed were illegal, and that they had absolutely no reservations about doing it.
I can't speculate as to what the Trump campaign was doing because I didn't work on the Trump campaign. But what I do know is that, you know, there is a perverse company culture inside of Cambridge Analytica, and as the undercover shows, they're willing to go to extreme lengths to service their clients, and they'll do anything that helps, whether it's legal or not.
Whether it's legal or not. So basically, in a nutshell, for the broad picture, okay, not to drill down on apps and Facebook, although I think our audience gets it because you guys are on the internet, because this show is on the internet. But, you know, we can go through all these articles that take it apart in the next hour, okay, like how they got it without your permission, and that they sold it, and the foreign actors, and getting your data back, and why there were 44 campaigns of Republicans that were sold by Cambridge Analytica on using this stolen data. You know, so basically this brilliant social media effort that, you know, Brad Parscale and Jared Kushner, it was all stolen Facebook data. Okay, that's what it is. But this company is a foreign defense contractor with little or no morality or scruples or respect for the law, whether it be British law or American law. And foreign actors were selling an American candidate to Americans, foreign actors. And that's important because that's illegal. And this is why Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan are trying to pretend they care about the Mueller investigation and that they'll be cooperative and blah, blah, blah. But they're moving closer and closer to firing Mueller, but not real fast, because these are stupid guys who do stupid things, but it takes them a very long time to do them. They're like the bull that tiptoes up to the china shop before they wreck the whole thing. But the important portion is that you understand that foreign actors from both the UK, which is our special relationship, and adversaries like Russia, have factions in them, like Russia and the Brexit people, who are white nationalists and white supremacists and love Vladimir Putin and the way he purges his society of undesirables, journalists, truth tellers, and that they have come to America and attacked us. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.